Hello and welcome viewers, I am Pia and you're watching NewsX. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has declared that eliminating Hamas's top leadership would bring an end to the war in Gaza. He has accused Hamas of repeatedly derailing ceasefire efforts and ignoring the suffering of the residents of Gaza. Thousands of Israelis have rallied and marched in Tel Aviv, calling on Benjamin Netanyahu to reach a hostage deal with Hamas and to end the war. Protesters blamed Netanyahu for derailing ceasefire negotiations and hindering a hostage deal. US President Donald Trump's top diplomat Marco Rubio has reportedly arrived in Israel. The trip is taking place after Trump had rebuked Israel over the unprecedented attack against Hamas leaders meeting in Doha. Now, prior to his departure, Rubio had stated that talks would focus on hostage release, ending the war in Gaza, and a roadmap to rebuilding the Strip. China's military has stated that it has conducted routine patrols in the South China Sea. A spokesperson for the Chinese military has warned that the Philippines must stop provoking incidents and escalating tensions. The two countries have been in a long-running maritime standoff that has included regular clashes with Coast Guard ships and naval exercises. Up to 150,000 people gathered in central London for Unite the Kingdom march organized by far-right activist Tommy Robinson. Police have stated that 25 arrests have been made as officers face significant aggression from these protesters. A counter-demonstration by about 5,000 anti-racism campaigners also took place, with clashes erupting near Whitehall and Trafalgar Square. The Ukrainian military has confirmed attacking Russia's Kirishi oil refinery. The refinery is one of Russia's largest processing units. About 355,000 barrels of crude oil are produced per day. Wreckage from a downed drone which crashed on the site of the refinery ignited a fire that has since been extinguished and no injuries have been reported. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's sister Kim Yo-jong called the South Korean US-Japan military drills as a reckless show of strength that could bring bad results. This comes as allies plan naval, air and missile defense exercises off Jeju Island from Monday to Friday next week, along with a tabletop drill to integrate military assets. Pyongyang sees these exercises as rehearsals for an invasion. Venezuela has accused the US of illegally detaining a fishing vessel with 9 crew members in its exclusive economic zone. Its foreign minister has stated that USS Jason Dunham destroyer boarded the boat for 8 hours, calling it a direct provocation. The incident comes amid soaring tensions as the US steps up naval patrols targeting Venezuelan drug trafficking. Those were the headlines in our first story. US Senator Marco Rubio is visiting Israel amid tensions over recent airstrikes on Hamas leaders in Qatar and settlement expansions in the West Bank. Now, Rubio has stressed upon the strong US-Israel relationship but has raised concerns about how the strikes impact efforts to free the 48 hostages held by Hamas. Now, he has highlighted the urgent need to release all the hostages and challenges ahead in rebuilding Gaza, with questions over who will lead and fund the recovery. The airstrike on Doha drew condemnation from countries across the world and disrupted ceasefire negotiations which were being brokered by Qatar. Meanwhile, Israel's nearly 2-year campaign in Gaza has caused over 64,000 deaths, and the United Nations has warned of a worsening humanitarian crisis. Rubio's trip follows a White House meeting with Qatar's Prime Minister and precedes President Trump's planned visit to the United Kingdom. Growing international moves to recognize Palestinian statehood is facing opposition from Israel and the United States. which now fears that it could strengthen Hamas. Tensions are rising further after Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu approved West Bank settlement expansions, prompting the UAE to issue warnings that this threatens the Abraham Accords and regional stability. Listen in to what U.S. Senator.
But that said, it's not going to shake our relationship with Israel. Is going to remain strong. And sometimes, things happen or come up in those relationships that perhaps you're not 100% aligned with or what have you. But it's not going to change the nature of our relationship with the Israelis. But we are going to have to talk about it. Primarily, what impact does this have? What happened? What impact does that have moving forward on what comes next? We just want to know what comes next. How do we get the 48 hostages out? What's the plan to defeat Hamas? So we can get to the next phase. I'm going to get a much better understanding of what their plans are moving forward. What's happened has happened. Obviously, we were not happy about it. The president was not happy about it. Now we need to move forward and figure out what comes next. Because at the end of the day, when all is said and done, there is still a group called Hamas, which is an evil group.
There, of course, we've heard Marco Rubio stating that the current U.S. administration is not happy with what transpired in Doha. Meanwhile, joining us on the broadcast is Dr. Punsara Amarasinghe. He's from the Kotalawala Defence University, joining us from Colombo in Sri Lanka. Thank you so much for taking our time speaking to us on NewsX World. A lot of high-octane developments are taking place in the Middle East. We do know recently there was a UNGA resolution that has been endorsed by more than 140 countries for the recognition of the state of Palestine. That's not all. We've seen recent strikes take place in Doha. The Qatari Prime Minister meet with Donald Trump and Marco Rubio at the White House as well, and now Rubio is headed to Israel. The focus of the Trump administration is to ensure that negotiations still continue even as Netanyahu is intensifying his offensive on the ground in Gaza. Where do you see the war headed next? Do you think the United States could convince Netanyahu to back down?
I think Marco Rubio's visit is quite decisive in these uncertain times, because from one side he has to make a balance between Israel and the other Gulf allies who have been standing in favor of the United States for a pretty longer period since the end of the Gulf War. We need to understand that United States during the Bush administration in the early 1990s assured complete regional security for these Gulf allies, and there is a considerable United States military presence in Gulf that includes Qatar as well. But Israeli strike on 9th of September, which can be described as the Qatari 9/9 experience, has completely altered this geopolitical situation, and it has led to a deep entanglement between Americans and also with the Middle Eastern allies. But the Rubio's visit probably will be a kind of a signal giving to the Gulf allies some sort of a legitimacy. At the same time, in Israel, I think if you just refer to the statements made by the US diplomat Rubio before he started his visit to Israel, it was quite clear that his main task is to accelerate the peace negotiation between Hamas and Israel to bring the hostages back. So which we need to understand as one of the key decisive signs from President Trump's administration. Trump has not completely abandoned the plan of bringing hostages safely back to Israel, because from Israeli point of view, the safety and well-being of their hostages who are being detained under the Hamas captivity is paramountly important. But at the same time, if you look at this Rubio's visit from a strategic level, he has a huge task to accomplish. From one side, he needs to reassure whatever the promises, whatever the credibility that the Gulf countries were having towards United States back on the track. Because I know the Hamas has been staying in Qatar since 2012. So they thought they looked at Hamas, they looked at Qatar as a kind of a safe haven, which was simply shattered by this recent attack. Right. So now Hamas leaders are equally aware of the fact that they're not safe anywhere else. Even in Qatar, they were targeted by the Israelis. So it's a kind of a dangerous sign. So the Rubio's visit will address on these critical issues in the days to come.
All right, Dr. Amar Singh, with that, I would like to thank you for taking our time, sharing your perspective, your analysis on NewsX World. Meanwhile, viewers, we're shifting away our focus from the Middle East and towards what's happening in the Caribbean. We're now learning that Venezuela has sharply criticized the United States after a destroyer allegedly intercepted and boarded a Venezuelan fishing vessel in its exclusive economic zone. Venezuelan Foreign Minister Juan Gil has called the move illegal and hostile, claiming that the vessel, which had 9 fishermen on board, was detained for 8 hours. He described the incident as a direct provocation aimed at escalating tensions. Listen in.
Una embarcación de pesca atunera venezolana, Carmen Rosa, esta que vemos acá, una embarcación palangrera que hace faena en el mar Caribe venezolano, autorizada por nuestro Ministerio de Pesca, con 9 pescadores, 9 humildes pescadores a bordo, fue de manera hostil abordada por una unidad de la Marina de Guerra de los Estados Unidos, una unidad militar, una fragata o un destructor misilístico, este que vemos acá, el destructor misilístico Jason Dunham, matrícula DDG 109, equipado con importantes armas, misiles, hombres, efectivos militares y soldados y oficiales con armas largas, armas de guerra. El gobierno venezolano exige que Estados Unidos cese de inmediato estas acciones que ponen en riesgo la seguridad y paz del Caribe.
This comes amid rising tensions between Venezuela and the United States. Meanwhile, the U.S. has stepped up military patrols in the Caribbean, targeting drug cartels. U.S. President Donald Trump recently increased pressure on Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, accusing him of leading a cocaine cartel. In response, Maduro has bolstered military presence along the coast and has called for civilians to defend Venezuela. With us on the broadcast is Dr. Satoru Nagao, fellow at the Hudson Institute, joining us live from Tokyo. So what do you make of the posturing of the U.S. military in the Caribbean? Now, the Venezuelan government is claiming that the U.S., one of the U.S. destroyers, USS Jason Dunham, was operating in Venezuela's exclusive economic zone.
Indeed, this issue is a very important issue for the United States because viewed from the Trump administration, this is domestic issue, even if the location is Venezuela. The U.S. Trump administration focusing on the illegal immigration or drug issues smuggled from the other country as a key law and order issue in the United States. So this is appeal point of the Trump administration. So that's why he need to show the achievement about these issues, the illegal immigration or drug issue. That's why Venezuela could be the target in the Latin America because Maduro government in Venezuela is quite challenging against the United States for a long time. So it could be its main target, main bad guy for the United States. So that's why deploying the military forces, the cracking down the smugglers or drug cartels, it could happen as an achievement for the United States. But at the same time, this could not be the regime change of Venezuela. Recently, the U.S. administration did not focusing on the regime change in any countries, including Venezuela, because after after changing the regime, someone need to take care of that region. In this case, if the U.S. commit regime change, there's a possibility that the U.S. need to improve this, and this is increasing work for the United States. So that's why this is not a military operation against the regime itself, but against the drug cartel. And another aspect is very important too, because this is the place of the American continent. Because recently the Trump administration focusing on the Greenland, Panama, and other area in Latin America. So American continent is a very important area for the United States. So that's why the Venezuela could be the one of the symbol which the U.S. showed who is the master in the American continent. That's why this operation could be escalated, because the United States try to show their achievement, both the domestic audience and other audience in the American continent. And so that is a very important symbol of the Trump administration's achievement. Thank you.
All right, so with that, I'd like to thank you for taking our time speaking to us on NewsX World. With that, viewers, we're shifting our focus away from the Caribbean towards what's happening as far as the Russia-Ukraine war is concerned. We're now learning that Russia's defense ministry has claimed that its forces have shot down 340 Ukrainian drones over the last 24 hours. Now, reportedly, Russia has also launched attacks against Ukrainian command posts, foreign liaison units and dronage facilities. Now, according to the governor of Leningrad region, a fire has been put out at the Kirishi oil refinery in Russia's northwest, which is one of the country's top 2 oil refineries. This comes as the Ukrainian military has confirmed attacking the refinery. However, no injuries have been reported at the site. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian military intelligence agency has also claimed to successfully hit a different target in Ufa, the capital of Bashkortostan Republic within Russia, stating that it caused significant explosion, damaging critical production equipment. The head of Bashkortostan Republic has confirmed that an oil refinery was hit in the region by 2 drones, which caused the fire but did not result in any casualties. With us on the broadcast is Mr. Patikrit Pain, a strategic and international affairs expert, joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you so much for taking our time speaking to us on NewsX World. It's interesting that Ukrainian military has now come out and claimed that it has targeted an oil refinery in Russia. This follows statements made by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and appeals that he made to other NATO countries, the G7 and the G20, in order to impose tariffs on countries purchasing Russian oil. What do you make of the fact that energy infrastructure is being targeted?
Good afternoon. Small correction, it's Patikrit Fine. Secondly, let's put it this way, the war between Russia and Ukraine are showing no sign of any kind of reduction in tension, and it is only going to go up. Today, Ukraine has far more offensive capability, having been given by the NATO member countries to strike deep inside Russia and especially target critical infrastructures. On the flip side, the more they target the refineries of Russia, the more Russia will be compelled to export more crude oil to countries like China and India for refining of that oil and for export to other countries. The way America is talking about complete halt of supply of Russian oil or procurement of Russian oil, I think it is not feasible, because if that eventually happens someday, the price of oil would go up in a cataclysmic manner, which may potentially raise the price of oil even to $150 a barrel or $200 a barrel. So on one hand, we witnessed that President Trump talks about halting the war, but at the same time, even as he talks about reducing Russia's capability to continue the war by imposing more tariff and sanctioning countries who buy oil from Russia, and pleading with NATO to put similar tariffs. But at the same time, we witnessed that United States and other NATO member countries keep on arming Ukraine, no more with defensive weapon systems, but offensive weapon systems, which are only going to increase the quantum of the conflict, and that may even breach the territorial borders of Ukraine and reach its countries in the vicinity, which are critical NATO members and are repository to the depot of arms from which the supply eventually reaches Ukrainian armed forces. So what we see indications of some Russian drones here or there falling in Poland or potentially in other adjoining countries like Romania. These are indications that by next year this time, we fear that the war may eventually take the shape of full-fledged Russia versus NATO. Because as it is de facto, it is a Russia versus NATO conflict going on. Ukraine on its own did not have the capability to counter Russia with a mere $200 billion GDP. It is purely these NATO countries which are arming Ukraine and fighting the war against Russia. It may take a more devastating turn. Targeting of critical infrastructure eventually may have a critical impact on the global price and supply of crude oil and other related products like petrol and diesel. Back to you.
Indeed, I request you to stay on with us. I would like to, in fact, inform our viewers a little more about one of the points you've raised regarding Romania in particular. Romania is a NATO member. It, in fact, scrambled its fighter jets after a Russian drone breached its airspace during attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure. 2 F-16 jets were deployed to intercept the low-flying drone near the Danube, but it disappeared without posing danger to the Romanian population. Now, Romania's defense minister has condemned Moscow's behavior, calling it reckless and warning that it threatens regional stability. Romania, of course, shares a long border with Ukraine and has seen Russian drone fragments fall on its soil since the war began in 2022. And what's interesting is that this is the second NATO country after Poland, which has seen such incursions. Poland, of course, took up this matter rather vociferously with other NATO members. Still with us on the broadcast is Mr. Pen. Interesting developments. You've, of course, stated that you see this war protracting, but I'd like to come back to the point of appeals that are now being pushed forward by Donald Trump and Zelensky. They're trying to, in a way, throttle Russia's oil exports. They're targeting China and India in particular. In fact, several European nations have now been appealed to cut down on imports, but we do know that Europe at large is quite energy hungry. It is reliant on cheap Russian oil and refined oil from India and China in particular. Do you think the other NATO countries and EU members at large would heed what Trump and Zelensky have been saying?
Well, firstly, it is very difficult for a country like India to reduce its procurement of oil from Russia because, OPEC is predominantly supplying to NATO or EU countries and United States. Countries like Iran and Venezuela are under sanctions. So what options does a country like India have apart from procuring from Russia? Secondly, if India is procuring from Russia, then, the nudge and the green signal actually came from the West that we should keep on procuring from Russia to stabilize the price of oil. So this is not something surprising that India is buying. And it is very difficult either for Russia or China, and either for India or China to reduce the import of crude oil. And similarly, it is very difficult for NATO countries, especially Central European countries or Western European countries, and even many of the Eastern European countries as well, to reduce the procurement of gas from Russia, because the entire energy infrastructure of Europe is Russia-centric. Now, to suddenly reduce the energy procurement would have a debilitating impact on their own economies as well, and not just for the conflict. But at the same time, if Trump administration is so much concerned about the conflict, all that it needs to do is to stop or halt the supply of weapon systems to Ukraine, and the war would end by today itself, because Ukraine does not have the capability to sustain this war on its own unless that free supply of weapon systems keep coming. Now, Trump has signed a critical mineral deal with Ukraine. Trump has asked the NATO member countries to raise their defense budget up till 5% of their GDP. Trump wants more weapon systems from the American military-industrial complex to be sold to Ukraine. And then he wants the war to be stopped by putting tariff on countries who buy oil from Russia. I think there is a certain amount of hypocrisy and double standard in it. And it is precisely because of this reason that war, in spite of the apparent display of intent, will never eventually actually be stopped, because the ulterior reason for this war is the expansionist approach of NATO, against which President Putin has talked about many times, against which even India's external affairs minister has mentioned once or twice, that unless NATO's expansion stops, unless supply of weapon systems stops, this war is not going to end. So I don't think even European Union or NATO members who would want this war, who would want Russia to be contained, perhaps from their perspective, they are still, even then, not in a position to stop the procurement of oil from Russia or energy from Russia, predominantly gas, because there is no other viable avenue through which they can get a sustained supply of oil. That's the problem. It is a problem of supply chain. It is a problem of sustained supply. It is a problem of demand and supply. It is a problem of the fact that Russia is indispensable when it comes to the global energy market. There is no country which can replace or substitute for Russia's supply of energy. It is simply not possible. Back to you.
All right, so with that, I'd like to thank you for taking our time speaking to us on NewsX World. With that, we shift our focus towards what's happening in the United States of America. Mourners have gathered at Turning Point headquarters in Phoenix, Arizona, in order to remember conservative activist Charlie Kirk, who was shot and killed during an outdoor event at a university. The 31-year-old ally of U.S. President Donald Trump was speaking before 3,000 people when a gunshot rang out from a nearby rooftop. His supporters mourned his loss, calling him a man of dialogue and understanding. The suspect, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson, was arrested after confessing to relatives. Meanwhile, FBI Director Kash Patel has confirmed his capture a mere 33 hours after the killing. The incident has sparked widespread outrage, with both Democrats and Republicans denouncing political violence. U.S. President Donald Trump called the attack a heinous assassination. Listening to what some of the mourners grieving the loss of Kirk have had to say.
Charlie, but it's just the fact that somebody, even though beliefs might be different, there is somebody who sticks up for themselves and sticks up for others, and will say things and maybe bring people over to one side, but at least have an open debate. Even though people may not agree on things, at least he provided a platform for others to voice their opinions as well.
He's so missed, and I just wish and pray that people can at least take the time to not just read little clips of what he supposedly said or did, really watch his videos from start to finish. Because what they're saying about him is really disheartening. He was a wonderful man. He loved everybody. He didn't discriminate. He really didn't. And he tried to find commonality in every person, and he usually did.
But he showed you that it's okay to stand up for your beliefs. It's okay to go against the opposition, when in reality, we're the winners, and that's the reason why people...
I think that his death is a tragic extreme of cancel culture. This is what can happen. He wanted to have dialogue, quiet dialogue. He'd never responded with violence. He never raised his voice even. And he had people in dialogue peacefully.
Shifting our focus to South Asia, Nepal is still recovering from deadly protests that rocked the country earlier this week. It claimed 51 lives and more than 1,300 people were injured across the country. The unrest was sparked by anger over political corruption and wealth inequality. It prompted its former Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli to resign, leading to a historic appointment of Sushila Karki as the country's first female Prime Minister. She is holding this post for the interim. Now, in the days following the clashes, Karki visited hospitals in Kathmandu, checking on the injured and urging calm as the capital slowly returned to normalcy after days of curfew and disruption. The protests saw Nepal's Gen Z taking to the streets in large numbers, many organized through social media platforms like TikTok and Instagram. Young people targeted parliament, luxury hotels and residences of political leaders, expressing their frustration over the luxurious lifestyles of politicians' children, while many Nepalese struggle to make ends meet. Protesters have spoken of their hope for a future free of corruption with fair opportunities for all. Listen in.
The main reason was corruption that arises with everyone who is ruling the country, who is leading the country. They undergo a lot of corruption. That results in less development, but still the youth were fighting for their employment. Youth still were struggling to live. But as lots of youth were struggling on their own condition, but every Nepo babies, the babies that politicians' babies were having a relaxed life. That creates hunger of revolution in youth. At the same time, government banned social media from Nepal. And social media was a platform where youth can deploy their voice. They can raise their voice through. And ban on social media creates, it pressurizes the voice of youth. And it needs to blast one day. And as a result, the blast happens.
Going forward, I want my Nepal, my country to be corruptionless and very does not have any opportunity. We did had a lack of opportunity. So I guess in future our other generations will have a very better futures, and they will be able to do and contribute in their own country. So I guess it will be very good for them and for us too.
With that, viewers, it's a wrap on this bulletin. More news and updates on the other side. Stay tuned on NewsX World.